everybody, welcome back into Cherry Picking. Today's video, Fantasy Hockey Mailbag for Week 8 of the Fantasy Hockey season. As always, a video presented by FanDuel Canada, North America's #1 sportsbook. The link is in the description to download that app today. We've got 5 or 6 questions here for the mailbag. A lot of questions about JT Miller, some questions about some trades as well, about the goalie situation in Toronto now that Joseph Woll's playing a little bit better, and the surprise kind of add and drop that the St. Louis Blues made, dumping Drew Bannister and adding Jim Montgomery as their head coach. So let's get into today's video. All right, so the first one is a 2-part question here. We've got, should I hang on or trade JT Miller? And the second one, I'm looking to trade 2 people, Lucas Raymond and Nico Hischier as a 2-for-1. Who do you think I could get for them? So the first part, JT Miller left, I believe it was like last week now, or maybe a week and a half, left the team for personal reasons. We do know it's not related to alcohol or substance abuse. He just needed a reset. He said he needed a mental reset. The coach and the management staff talked about how he's a player that always wants to play at 100%, and he wasn't. So he thought the best thing for him was some sort of mental reset, which, maybe that works for him. But he is expected to return relatively soon, sooner than probably a lot of people would have thought. Elliot Friedman talked about it on his podcast that he's supposed to be back with the team on December 3rd following their road trip that they're currently on, which would technically make him eligible to play December 6th against the Blue Jackets, which is, I guess at this point you could call it like his target date. He had 16 points in 17 games before taking his leave, so I think Vancouver will be very happy to kind of welcome him back into the lineup. So hang on to JT Miller for sure when he's healthy. He's an unbelievable fantasy hockey contributor. And then for the second question for the trade, I don't know if I'd really want to trade Nico Hischier at this point. Like, he is a front runner at this point, him and Alexander Barkov to win the Selke. And I know that's obviously not like a huge factor or a contributing factor to being like a good fantasy hockey player, but Nico Hischier has had a awesome start to the year, and you can't put it by the wayside either. He's playing on a very good New Jersey Devils team. He's currently tied 6th in goals in the NHL with 13. He's third in individual expected goals for, one of 4 players, I believe, to have an individual expected goals for above 10 this season. He's creating a ton of offense. Leads the NHL in faceoff wins, the 322. Sidney Crosby only in second. And like I mentioned, Devils are good. Sure, his shooting percentage is relatively high right now, but it'd be risky to sell him for someone who's, let's say, not having as good of a start right now. Like, maybe you try to trade him for like Philip Forsberg, who's on a very underperforming Nashville team. He's been like the one kind of bright spot with like 16 or 17 points this year, but he still has more points than him. A guy like Jason Robertson, do you want to risk that? Jason Robertson's had a slow start, and you've taken the advantage of Nico Hischier's good start, but if you trade him for Jason Robertson at this point and then both these players play the same thing, you kind of feel like an idiot at this point. So I wouldn't be looking to really trade Nico Hischier. Even Lucas Raymond's off to a hot start too. He's up to close to 20 points as well. So I wouldn't trade either of those players right now, especially for a 2-for-1, because at this point, like, to get the value back for that, you'd have to trade for a player that's ranked in the top 10 already. So I wouldn't really be looking to move either of those players and hold on to JT. All right, so the next question we have here, Noah Hanifin or Radko Gudas? It's an interesting question, and it totally depends on what kind of league that you're in at this point. Like, Noah Hanifin, obviously on Vegas now after getting traded last year from Calgary, has had a really good start to the year. Definitely the first 10 to 15 games as Vegas was kind of rolling, Noah Hanifin was one of those guys as well. 3 goals, 9 assists, 12 points on the season so far, 40 shots on goal. Creates a decent amount of offense for defensemen. His individual expected goals for is right around 2 so far this year. Doesn't really throw the body around a ton. Blocks a decent amount of shots. Radko Gudas is a different player, complete opposite player than Noah Hanifin. Noah Hanifin's going to play in a lot of, obviously, offensive situations, playing a Vegas team that's going to be a lot more competitive and win a lot more games than Anaheim this year. Radko Gudas, if you only need blocks and hits, you pick up Radko Gudas. One of the better defensemen to own in bangers leagues, 100%. He doesn't contribute really in the points department. 3 assists just so far this year, 15 shots on goal, no shots, but 64 hits and 51 blocks. That's kind of what you're looking for as well. Even for him this year, I'd say those numbers are a little bit low, at least in the hits department. So I think you have to go with Hanifin here is the easy answer for me. But if you, like I mentioned, if you only need blocks and hits, then you got to be Gudas. All right, so the next question we have here, the guy kind of lays out how many points you get per goal, assist, power play point in his league, and asks, trading Drake Batherson and Seth Jones worth Heiskanen? I need to open up a spot, taking Georgiev off IR. So this is obviously a question that's a little bit older. I would definitely do that. Like, Heiskanen is going to bounce back as well. If you want to call his start like not good enough, like 4 goals, 5 assists, 9 points, 47 shots so far. This is a guy who's, for fantasy hockey wise, a little bit inconsistent. You could say over the last couple of years. Last year, I finished inside the top 25. The year before that, he was top 10. The year before that, he was outside the top 30. But I think on a Dallas team that's going to compete this year, if he plays a full season, he will be a very big contributor. Batherson off to one of his best starts, or his best start of his NHL career, 9 goals, 13 assists so far this year. Seth Jones, kind of a throw-in defenseman if you're trading him away at this point just to replace Heiskanen, but he does have 10 points in just 17 games played so far this year. But the reason why I would do this trade and take Heiskanen, Chicago still won't be good. They won't really be in a good position for Seth Jones to have consistent fantasy hockey performances, I would say. Maybe through spurts when they're winning games, but if he's just on the ice for a bunch of negatives, that's just not going to help him. Batherson, as I mentioned, off to an unreal start, but he's still behind Tkachuk and Stützle in terms of points. And I think as the season goes on, we'll see the gap just between Batherson and then Tkachuk and Stützle just continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger. I would do this trade for Heiskanen. I think there's a lot of upside acquiring a guy like him at this point of the season, considering if you want to call this a slow start, despite him having 4 goals. And you don't really have an option too if you need to open up a spot to open up for a goalie who you're taking off IR. So yes, I would do this trade. All right, the fourth question we have for this week's mailbag is Joseph Woll worth taking now? I know Stolarz is the starter, but could be good goalie depth. Yes, 100%. There is definitely validity to owning Joseph Woll in fantasy hockey, and his roster percentage speaks to that. He's 76% rostered. Stolarz is 81% rostered. So if you want to go off that, yes, 100%. Joseph Woll should be owned in every single one of your leagues, especially if you look at their last 2 weeks of hockey. Their last 6 games, Woll has started 4 of them. He's gone 4-0. The question, with Woll is always, can he stay healthy? In those 4 games, his goals saved above expected. I think top 10 in the NHL over that span. So he's playing very well. Stolarz obviously playing great too. His 10 goals saved above expected is 7th best in the NHL, so he's been a top 10 goalie this year. I think the style Toronto's playing as well this season just condones better goalie play compared to what we saw last year. Craig Berube's definitely brought in a more physical aspect to their game. They brought in better players that can help them play better defensively, guys like Chris Tanev. It seems like the whole attitude of the team has switched, so both goalies I think are worth owning. It's hard to say how this split will go. I think they'll go 1-for-1, unless one goalie's really hot. Maybe they'll ride him a little bit, but I doubt we'll ever see a goalie at this point have more than 3 consecutive starts. So I think both goalies are definitely worth owning at this point. All right, and the last question we have, can Jim Montgomery positively affect the Blues' fantasy relevant players? I think 100% the easy answer to this is a yes. Obviously, Kyrou is one of their, I would say their most skilled forward, their best forward, along with Robert Thomas and maybe Buchnevich, but he currently leads the team in points with 19. Buchnevich is right next to him. Colton Parayko's start to the season, I don't know if Jim Montgomery is going to be able to keep that as consistent with 12 points. He has 4 goals already. But I think, Robert Thomas coming back from injury, for whatever reason, some of the leagues that I'm in, where there's 10 to 12 men leagues, he's still available on the waiver wire, which is crazy. This is a guy who was at one point last year, and if not by the end of the season, top 5 in assists. I think that can happen again with Jim Montgomery at the helm. I think we're going to see a much better offensive performances from this Blues team for the rest of the season too, like we saw in their first game against the Rangers with Jim Montgomery as their coach. Obviously, you get a little bit of a boost, but easily their best offensive game and their best complete game. They had an expected goals for as a team above 5, which has yet to happen this year, as per the Natural Stat Trick website. So that's one of the key contributors there. You got to look at that game. Obviously, it won't be that good every game, but it's definitely good to see that there's that option now there to see guys like Kyrou, Buchnevich. Braden Shen had a pretty good start to the year, shoots the puck a lot as well, have fantasy relevant seasons. And I think Robert Thomas, you can group him in there. Jake Neighbors, depending on where he kind of ends up in this lineup for this Jim Montgomery-led Blues team, but definitely a lot of positives very few negatives, I would say, coming out of this Jim Montgomery hire for the Blues, especially when you're looking at it from a fantasy hockey perspective. All right, thank you guys for tuning in. Let me know what you thought of this week's Fantasy Hockey Mailbag. Shout out to FanDuel Canada for sponsoring the video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.